Let's start with a big question. If you could pack up and move anywhere on the entire planet, where would you go? It's a fun thought experiment, right? But for a lot of us, it's starting to feel less like a daydream and more like a necessity. The old path to success, work hard, buy a house, retire comfortably, it just feels broken.
So that leads us to a pretty radical idea. What if we've been chasing the wrong thing all along? What if the real goal isn't about getting rich, but about living well? Today, we're going to explore a completely different kind of wealth, what you might call value for life. It's a world where your time, your health, and your happiness are the only currency that really matters.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to dig into why so many of us feel like we're on an economic treadmill. Then, we'll rewind the clock to a single moment in 1971 that literally changed how money works. After that, we'll meet two very different kinds of people, the strategist and a flourisher, and see how their clashing ideas can actually help us find the perfect place to call home. All right, let's kick things off with a feeling I think a lot of us know all too well, the sense that you're running faster and faster, but you're not actually getting anywhere. Why does just building a stable life feel like such an uphill battle these days?
Look, it's not just in your head. The numbers back it up. For decades now, the cost of the basics, housing, education, healthcare, has absolutely exploded. Meanwhile, for the average person, wages have just flatlined. And that growing gap isn't just a little stressful, it's a giant flashing sign that the system itself has a fundamental problem. It makes you want to find an escape hatch. But to figure out where that escape hatch is, we have to understand how we got locked in this room in the first place.
Believe it or not, a huge part of our modern economic anxiety can be traced back to one single decision. A choice made over half a century ago that completely rewrote the rulebook for money across the entire globe. On a Sunday night, August 15, 1971, President Nixon got on TV and announced that the US dollar would no longer be exchangeable for gold at a fixed rate. They called it the Nixon shock, and with that one move, he basically blew up the system that had kept global money stable since World War II. He had no idea at the time, but he was setting the stage for the economic squeeze we all feel today.
So how in the world did this happen? Well, after the war, everyone agreed to peg their money to the US dollar because the dollar was backed by a real thing, gold. It created stability. But then came the 60s, and the US started spending a ton of money. So many dollars were printed that other countries got nervous and started showing up saying, hey, we'd like our gold now, please. To stop the US gold reserves from being completely drained, Nixon just cut the cord. And just like that, the dollar wasn't tied to anything real anymore. It became a fiat currency, and the entire world economy was suddenly floating on an open sea.
Now this slide is the key to everything. Look at the real-world impact. Before 1971, when a company or the country got more productive, the workers' paychecks went up right along with it. Made sense, right? But after 1971, that link was completely severed. Productivity kept on soaring, but wages for most people just stopped. Oh, and the dollar itself, it's lost over 98% of its value compared to gold since that day. This is where that feeling of being squeezed comes from. And when the very foundation of money cracks, people develop two totally different philosophies for how to deal with it.
Okay, first up is the strategist. The strategist looks at this post-1971 world and sees a system that's fragile and unpredictable. Their main goal isn't comfort or luxury, it's finding a lifeboat. They're not asking, how can I get rich? They're asking, how do I make sure I'm okay when things fall apart?
This quote from a Reddit user just nails the strategist's mindset. Notice the focus. Get away from the big, fragile urban centers, find a place that's defensible, self-sufficient, and far from the chaos. It's a very practical, risk-first way of looking at the world.
So what's on their checklist for the perfect spot? It's not about fancy restaurants or nightlife, it's about resilience. They're looking for places that can stand on their own 2 feet. Does it have a stable government, low population? And most importantly, can it provide its own food, water, and energy? Are the people there self-sufficient? They are basically trying to build a personal fortress against an uncertain future.
Now, if you're a strategist in the US, this logic probably leads you to places like the Mountain West or even Alaska. States like Wyoming and Montana are popular for their wide-open spaces, friendly tax laws, and economies built on real stuff like farming and energy. Idaho brings a little tech into the mix, and Alaska, well, Alaska has insane resources and a culture that basically defines self-sufficiency. But what if building a fortress is the wrong approach? What if instead of just surviving the worst, you could actually build the best?
And that brings us to our second mindset, the flourisher. The flourisher asks a totally different question. Instead of hoarding resources just to survive, they ask, how can we use our resources in the most efficient way possible to create long, happy, meaningful lives? They're looking for the ultimate return on investment, but for happiness.
To figure this out, the flourisher ignores things like GDP and looks at something called the Happy Planet Index, or HPI. And this is a brilliant idea. It takes a country's life expectancy and its citizens' reported well-being, and then it divides all that by its environmental footprint. So the goal isn't just to be happy, it's to be happy efficiently, without burning up the whole planet to do it.
And these two maps show you the problem perfectly. On the left, you've got life expectancy. The green spots where people live the longest are mostly rich, developed countries. No surprise there. But now look at the map on the right, which shows carbon footprint. Those same green countries are now glowing red. It means they achieved that long life by consuming a massive, totally unsustainable amount of the world's resources. The HPI is all about finding the sweet spot in between.
So who wins? You might be surprised. It's not Switzerland or Norway. It's Vanuatu, a small island nation in the Pacific. They report well-being scores as high as Australia, and people there live into their 70s, all while having a tiny carbon footprint. This just flips the whole script on its head. It proves you don't need a massive industrial economy to build a happy, healthy society.
Another hero of the HPI is Costa Rica, and their story is just incredible. Back in 1949, they made a wild decision. They completely abolished their army. They took all that money they would have spent on the military and poured it straight into universal healthcare and free education for their citizens. And the result? A peaceful, smart, and consistently one of the happiest populations on Earth.
Okay, so we've got the strategist in their bunker on one side and the flourisher in their paradise on the other. But for most of us, the real answer isn't choosing one or the other. It's about finding what you could call your own sovereign space, a place that smartly blends the need for security with the desire for well-being.
This is where you can start to figure out which camp you're in. It's about matching who you are with a real place. So for example, say you've got practical skills but not a ton of money. You might be a resourceful artisan. A place like Vietnam or Bali could be perfect, with a super low cost of living where your skills can go a long way. Or maybe you're a labor integrator. You just want a foothold in a safe, stable society. A country like Portugal actually has pathways for unskilled work, giving you a chance to get into a system with good social safety nets. See? It's not about finding the one best place. It's about finding the right place for you.
And that really brings us to the final point here. After 1971, our whole idea of wealth got more and more abstract, more disconnected from real life. But this search for the best place to live, it forces us to get back to what actually matters.
Because ultimately, this isn't just about picking a spot on a map. It's about reclaiming your personal sovereignty. It's about having control over your own time, your own health, and being part of a real community. That is the new wealth. That's the real treasure.
So here it is, the most important takeaway of all. In a world where money can be printed into oblivion and your hard work doesn't always translate into a better life, maybe the smartest, most radical thing you can do is find a place where money itself just matters less. A place where your well-being isn't tied to the whims of the global economy.
So I'm going to leave you with this question. Just forget about bank accounts and stock markets for a minute. In your own life, what is the true measure of wealth? What do you value most, and where on this beautiful planet are you going to go to find it?